Following up on the idea that we should not seek validation for our writing or speaking, Epictetus tells us directly, "Do not let people hear you giving public recitations of your work. Even if someone happens to praise you, you must restrain yourself. You should be perfectly content to look like a nobody, or to be seen as a complete know-nothing in the eyes of others. Instead of showing off your intellectual achievements, show them something much more valuable. Show them that you know how to manage your desires so that you never fail to get what you want. And show them that you know how to manage your aversions so that you never experience what you do not want. Let other people spend their time practicing for lawsuits or trying to solve complex logical puzzles and syllogisms. That is their business. Your duty as a practitioner of Stoicism is much more serious. Your job is to prepare for the hardest things in life. You must prepare for death, imprisonment, torture, and exile, and you must prepare to face all such evils with absolute confidence. This confidence comes from having faith in the divine order or the universe. The universe has called upon you to face these trials because it has judged you worthy of playing this role. When you willingly take on this role and face these hardships, you will demonstrate the ultimate superiority of reason and the mind over any external forces that are unconnected to your own will. Once you understand this, the core Stoic paradox will no longer seem so absurd or contradictory. That paradox is the idea that we should be confident and cautious at the exact same time. We must be entirely confident when it comes to things outside of our will, like external events and hardships. And we must be deeply cautious about the things within our own will, carefully guarding our choices and judgments. Moving into the next section, titled On Tranquility, Epictetus shifts the focus to how we handle high-stakes situations, such as being put on trial. He says that if you are headed to court, you must stop and consider very carefully what it is you actually want to keep, and in what specific area you are trying to win. If your primary goal is to keep your character in line with nature, then you have every hope of success. In fact, you already have all the means you need to achieve this. You do not have a single worry in the world. Why? Because if you only want to keep what is yours by right and what is by nature entirely free, you have nothing to fear. These are the choices and judgments of your own mind. No one else controls them. No one can ever take them away from you. If you simply want to be a person of honor and a person who keeps their word, who is going to be able to stop you, you might say that you do not want to be obstructed or forced to do something against your will. Well, Epictetus asks, who is actually going to force you to desire things that you do not approve of? Who can force you to dislike something against your better judgment? Nobody has that power over your internal mind. You might argue that the authorities will threaten you with terrible punishments that completely overawe and terrify you. But Epictetus responds, how can they make you think of those physical sufferings as something you are morally obligated to avoid at all costs? They cannot force your mind to adopt that belief. As long as your own desires and your own aversions remain under your complete control, there is absolutely nothing more to worry about. For a Stoic, maintaining control of your own character is your opening statement, your exposition, and your definitive proof. In maintaining your virtue, there lies your true success, your final word, and your ultimate acquittal, regardless of what the jury decides. This is exactly why Socrates, when he was told to prepare himself for his famous trial, responded by asking, "Have I not been preparing for it my whole life?" When asked how he had been preparing, Socrates explained that he had simply tended to his own affairs. He had never done anything in violation of the divine or moral law, either publicly or privately. That lifelong commitment to virtue was his only necessary preparation. On the other hand, Epictetus warns, if you want to keep hold of external things, such as your physical body, your material belongings, and your public reputation, then his advice to you is quite different. Your preparations for court had better begin very early, and they will have to be long and exhausting. You will need to carefully research the character of the judge to know how to flatter him. You will have to make a thorough study of your opponent as well. If the situation calls for groveling to save your life or your property, then you must be prepared to grovel. You must be prepared to weep, to holler, and to completely degrade yourself. The choice is yours. Secure your inner freedom with ease, or become a slave to the court in order to protect your external possessions. Epictetus continues by making it very clear. Whenever external things are more important to you than your own integrity, then you must be fully prepared to serve those externals for the remainder of your life. Do not try to hedge your bets. Do not agree to be a slave to external things for a little while, and then decide to change your mind later. You must commit to one position or the other at once and without any reservations. You have to choose. You will either be free or you will be a slave. You will either be enlightened or you will be a fool. You will either be a thoroughbred horse or a broken-down nag. Either you must resign yourself to a life of abuse and groveling until the day you die, or you must escape that mindset immediately. For the sake of everything good, do not put up with years of abuse in the pursuit of external things, only to change your mind after you have already wasted your life. All of this humiliation can be completely avoided before it even begins. You just have to decide right now, once and for all, what you think is truly good and what is truly bad. To illustrate this, Epictetus brings up the ultimate example. Do you really think that if Socrates had any genuine concern for what other people could do to his physical body or his reputation, he would have stood before the court and spoken the way he did? He stood there and boldly declared that his accusers, Anytus and Meletus, could put him to death, but they could not actually harm him. Do you think Socrates was fool enough not to see that this defiant approach was going to lead to a very different result than if he had simply begged for his life? He knew exactly what he was doing. He made those provocative remarks precisely because he had already decided that his integrity was the only true good, and his physical survival did not matter in comparison. But Epictetus warns against blindly imitating this defiance without the underlying wisdom. He tells the story of a friend of his, named Heraclitus, who had a lawsuit over a piece of property on the island of Rhodes. Heraclitus presented his case, and successfully proved to the jury that he had the law and the right on his side. But then, he came to his concluding remarks, and his ego took over. He told the jury that he was not going to plead with them, and that he did not care what they decided. He even went so far as to say that they were more on trial than he was. As a result of this arrogant outburst, he completely sabotaged his own case and lost. Epictetus asks, why was that even necessary? If you are going to court, you do not have to plead or beg, but you also do not have to announce to everyone that you refuse to plead. There is no reason to say that, unless there is a specific, profound point in deliberately provoking the jurors, as there was in the unique case of Socrates. As for you, if you are just planning to go into court to fire off some arrogant parting shot at the jury, why bother to speak at all? Why even show up at the court in the first place? Because if you simply want to be crucified and destroyed, all you have to do is sit and wait, and the cross will come to you eventually. But if your reason and logic demand that you appear in court and do your absolute best to be persuasive, then you must do exactly what is required to present a good case, while simultaneously safeguarding your inner character. Because life is so unpredictable, Epictetus says it is stupid to ask a philosopher to tell you what to do. What is he supposed to tell you? Every situation is different. It would be much better for you to ask that they make your mind adaptable to any circumstance. Asking someone to tell you exactly what to do is exactly like an illiterate person asking you to tell them what to write whenever they are presented with a name. If you tell the illiterate person how to write the name John, and then someone else comes along and asks him to write the name Jane instead, what is going to happen? How is he going to know how to write it? On the other hand, if you take the time to learn your letters, which in this analogy means learning the foundational principles of Stoicism, then you are ready for absolutely anything that anyone dictates to you. You can spell any name. If you are not prepared with these basic principles, a teacher will not know what to tell you to do, because the circumstances will inevitably change, and there will be unexpected events that call for you to act completely differently. What will you do or say then, if you only memorized one specific action? So, the ultimate lesson is to hold onto the general principles of philosophy. Once you internalize the principles of what is truly in your control and what is not, you will never need specific, step-by-step advice again. Epictetus concludes his previous thought by warning us that if you constantly hanker after external things, you are inevitably going to be twirled round and round at the absolute whim of your master. You might ask, who is my master? The answer is simple. Your master is whoever controls the things that you desire, or whoever controls the things that you dislike. If they control what you want, they control you. Moving into the next section, titled Address to People Who Recommend Others to Philosophers, Epictetus tells a story about the famous philosopher Diogenes. It was a very shrewd reply that Diogenes gave to a person who had asked him to write a letter of reference. Diogenes told the man, "The person whose favor you are seeking will know that you are a human being as soon as he looks at you. Now, as to whether you are a good human being or a bad one. Well, either this person is a competent judge of character, or he is not. If he is a competent judge, he will be able to decide that entirely on his own, just by interacting with you. And if he is not a competent judge of character, then 1,000 letters of recommendation from me are not going to make him one." Diogenes pointed out that a coin might as well ask for a written recommendation to get someone to declare that it is genuine. If the person examining the coin is actually trained in distinguishing authentic coins from counterfeit ones, the coin does not need a letter. Its true value will simply speak for itself. Epictetus says that it is exactly the same way in human life. We need to develop objective standards, just like the standards that exist in the case of assaying silver. We should be able to make a claim similar to the asser who says, "Bring me any coin at all, and I will be able to tell you immediately whether or not it is genuine." Instead of doing this with human character, we only tend to do this when we are analyzing abstract syllogisms in a classroom. In logic, we love to be able to confidently say, "Bring me any argument you like, and I can judge whether it is analytically sound or not." Why are we so confident there? Because we have spent the time to know exactly how to analyze arguments, and we have developed the specific skill a person needs to evaluate competent logicians. But when it comes to real life, what do I actually do? Because I lack that training, what I say is good today, I will turn around tomorrow and swear is bad. And the sole reason for this inconsistency is that, compared to what I know about abstract logic and syllogisms, My actual knowledge and practical experience of how to live life fall far, far behind. In the next section, titled Address to Someone Who Had Been Caught Cheating on His Wife, Epictetus applies these standards of character to a real-world situation. He had been lecturing the class, saying that, as human beings, we are born to be faithful and trustworthy to one another. He argued that whoever denies this fundamental faithfulness is essentially denying their own humanity. Just as he was saying this, a well-known scholar entered the room. It just so happened that this specific scholar had recently been caught in adultery while he was living in Rome. Without missing a beat, Epictetus continued his lecture, looking at the situation directly. He asked the class, "What are we really doing when we choose to throw away our innate human faithfulness just so we can intrigue and sleep with our neighbor's wife? We are ruining and destroying something. But what exactly are we destroying? First and foremost, we are destroying the man of trust, the man of principle, and the man of piety that we once were. And is that all we are ruining? No. Epictetus points out that we are also ruining the very ideas of neighborliness, of friendship, and of community. When we do this, what kind of position are we putting ourselves in? How is anyone supposed to deal with you now? Can I deal with you as a neighbor? Can I deal with you as a friend? You would be some friend. Can I deal with you as a fellow citizen? How can a fellow citizen like you ever be trusted with anything important again?" Epictetus gives a harsh but practical analogy. He says, look, if you were a household bowl that was so leaky you could not hold water, you would be considered good for nothing anymore. You would be tossed straight into the rubbish dump, and absolutely no one would take the trouble to pick you out of the trash. So, what are we supposed to do with a human being who cannot even fulfill the most basic human role of being trustworthy? Fine, Epictetus says, you have proven you cannot function as a friend. But if you cannot even be trusted with basic faithfulness, how would you even do as a lowly slave? Epictetus continues to berate the adulterous scholar. He points out that if you cannot be trusted, who would have any confidence in you, even in the capacity of a lowly servant? Because of your actions, you have made yourself entirely useless. How would you like to be tossed in the rubbish dump, exactly like that leaky bowl, or thrown out like pieces of dung? Despite acting this way, you are still heard to complain, whining that no one gives you any respect as a scholar and a man of letters. Epictetus fires back. That is because you are a vile and worthless human being. It is exactly as if a swarm of wasps were to suddenly protest that they get no respect from humans. Of course they do not get respect. Everyone runs away from them, and some people will even swat them and kill them if given the chance. As an adulterer, your stinger is toxic. You infect everyone you sting with heartache, pain, and aggravation. What would you possibly have us do with you? Because of your total lack of trustworthiness, there is not any place in a functioning society where you will fit. But the scholar tries to justify his actions by quoting philosophy. He argues, wait a minute, did not the ancient philosophers say that nature intends women to be shared commonly among men? Epictetus is willing to grant this premise, but he immediately reframes it. He says, yes, but they are shared in the exact same way that a roast is shared among dinner guests. It is a shared meal, but there is still order and respect. Very well, after the host has carved the roast, and each guest has received his designated share, what do? If you feel like it, why not just reach over and grab your neighbor's portion too? Why not steal it right off his plate when he is not looking? Or just stretch out your hand and grab all the meat you can possibly manage to stuff into your own mouth? And if you cannot actually snatch the meat away from him, why not at least wipe your hands all over his food? and then lick the grease off your fingers. What fine and pleasant company you would make at a dinner party if you acted like that. You would be acting just like one of the unruly fellow diners alongside Socrates in the symposium. The cheating scholar tries another argument. He says, well, what about the public theater? It is open to all citizens, is it not? Epictetus replies, sure, it is open to everyone. So when everyone has arrived and taken their assigned seats, are you just going to come along and violently throw somebody out of their seat so you can sit there? You might say that is exactly how women are common property too. They are part of the community, but there are rules of respect. Epictetus tells the man, look, try this approach instead. When the law of the land, just like the host at a private dinner party, has assigned things properly, you need to be satisfied to claim only your own share. Do not be a greedy glutton and try to steal someone else's share. The scholar protests one last time, saying, but you do not understand, I am a highly educated scholar who understands the complex logic of Archidamus. Epictetus completely dismisses this. He tells the man, you can understand all the logic of Archidamus, and you can still be an adulterer and a cheater. You can read all the books in the world and still act like a predatory wolf or an ape, rather than a rational human being. What is to stop you? Knowledge without character means absolutely nothing. Moving into the next section, titled How Confidence and Carefulness Are Compatible, Epictetus returns to the core paradox of Stoicism. He explains that material things, all by themselves, are completely indifferent. However, the use that we make of those material things is not indifferent at all. The great question of life, then, is how to strike a perfect balance. On the one hand, we need a calm and composed attitude toward the things we cannot control. On the other hand, we need a conscientious outlook that is careful and deeply engaged, and neither slack nor careless. How do we do both? Epictetus says we should model ourselves on expert card players or players of a board game. To a master player, the physical chips do not matter at all, and the actual cards they are dealt do not matter. The player might say, how can I possibly know what the deal will be before it happens? I cannot. But making the most careful and skillful use of whatever cards I am dealt, that is where my true responsibility begins. So in the game of life, our very first job is this. We must strictly divide and distinguish all things into two distinct categories. First, there are the external things that I absolutely cannot control. Second, there are the internal choices I make with regard to those external things, which I absolutely do control. If you divide the world this way, where will you find what is truly good and what is truly bad? You will only find it inside yourself, in the choices you make. You must train yourself to never, ever speak of good or bad or advantage or harm, regarding anything that falls outside of your direct responsibility. Hearing this, a student asks a natural question. Well, if external things are not good or bad, does that mean that we should not care about how we use them? Epictetus answers immediately, not at all. Epictetus says that, in fact, it is morally wrong not to care about how we use external things, and it is completely contrary to our human nature to be entirely indifferent to our actions. We must be very careful about how we use the things in the world, because the way we use them is definitely not unimportant. But at the exact same time, we must remain calm and composed, because those material things, in and of themselves, simply do not matter. Epictetus explains that where it actually does matter, which is in the realm of his own choices, absolutely no one can compel him or stand in his way. And in the areas where he can be stopped or compelled, well, Getting those external things is not in his control anyway, and they are not truly good or bad in any case. But the way he chooses to use them is either good or bad, and that depends entirely on him. He admits that it is not easy to combine and reconcile these two mindsets. It is difficult to balance the carefulness and attention to detail of a person who is entirely devoted to external things, with the quiet dignity and composure of someone who is completely detached from them. It is difficult, but it is not impossible. In fact, if it were impossible to reconcile these two things, then human happiness would be impossible. To explain how this works, Epictetus uses the analogy of going on an ocean voyage. He asks, "What can I actually do when planning a trip? I can pick a good captain. I can select a sturdy boat. I can choose the right date, and I can pick the best time of year to sail. That is where my responsibility ends." But what happens if a massive storm hits while we are out at sea? Well, Epictetus says, at that point, it is no longer my business. I have already done everything that I possibly could. The storm is somebody else's problem now, namely, the captain's problem. But what if the storm is so bad that the boat actually begins to sink? What are my options then? Epictetus says, I do the only thing I am still in a position to do. I drown, but I make sure to drown fearlessly. I drown without bawling, without complaining, and without crying out to God, because I know the simple truth that whatever is born must eventually die. I am not immortal and I am not Father Time. I am just a human being. I am a small part of the whole universe, exactly like a single hour is a small part of a day. Just like the hour, I must abide my time, and just like the hour, I must eventually pass away. What difference does it really make whether my end comes by drowning in the ocean or by suffering from a disease? I have to go somehow, so I might as well go with dignity. You will find that highly skilled ball players do the exact same thing when they are playing a game. To a professional player, it is not the physical ball itself that they value. What counts as good or bad is how skillfully they throw and catch it. That is where the true grace and skill lie. It is all about the speed and the expertise. Their speed is so great that an amateur like me could not catch one of their throws, even if I spread out my coat to try and catch it. And their skill is so refined that if I throw the ball to them, no matter how terribly I throw it, they are bound to catch it gracefully. But if we enter the game and we are afraid to throw the ball, or we are constantly nervous about catching it, then the entire fun of the game is lost. How can we possibly preserve our composure when we are so uncertain and anxious about what to do next? One person in the crowd yells, "Throw it." Another person yells, "Do not throw it." Another person yells, "Throw it already." Suddenly, the whole thing turns into a chaotic shouting match instead of a beautiful sporting match. Epictetus points out that Socrates, more than anyone else, truly knew how to play ball. In his case, the playing field was not a sports arena. It was the deadly courtroom. While on trial for his life, Socrates playfully tossed the ball of logic to his accuser. He asked Innate to tell him how he could say that he did not believe in God. He asked if they were not agreed that there are minor gods and heroes, who are the children of gods, or the mixed offspring of gods and men. His accuser, Innate, was forced to concede the point. Then Socrates threw the ball again. He asked, if someone acknowledged that there were animals of mixed parentage, like half-breeds such as mules, do you not think they would also have to logically believe in the existence of the horses or the donkeys that actually produced those mules? Epictetus smiles at this brilliant defense. He says, it was exactly as if Socrates were just playing a relaxed game of ball, completely unbothered by the fact that his life was on the line. Epictetus reminds us that the ball in Socrates' case was not a toy. It was his actual life. The possibilities were imprisonment, exile, or execution. He faced the very real prospect of losing his beloved wife and having his children reduced to the devastating status of orphans. Those were the massive stakes of the game he was playing. And still, he played. And he handled the ball with absolute aplomb, completely unfazed. That is exactly what we need in our own lives. We need the star athlete's deep concentration, together with his effortless coolness. We must treat every external hardship as if it were just another ball that we were playing with, too. To be sure, external things of whatever kind do require great skill in their use, but we must never grow attached to them. Whatever these external things are, they should only serve as an opportunity for us to show how skilled we are in our handling of them. It is exactly like the art of weaving. The master weaver does not manufacture the wool himself. Instead, he simply makes the absolute best use of whatever wool he happens to be given. In the same way, God gives you food and property, and God can easily take them back. He can take your physical body back, too. Your job is simply to work with the material that you are given. If you go through a terrible trial and you come out all right, most regular people you meet will simply congratulate you on surviving. A shrewd and wise judge, however, will only praise you and share in your pleasure if he sees that you acted honorably throughout the entire ordeal. He will not praise you if he sees that your success or survival was owed to anything dishonest or cowardly. When success and happiness are come by fairly, then other people can truly be happy for us too. At this point, someone might ask a technical question. They might ask how it is that philosophers say some external things are in accordance with nature, while other external things are contrary to nature. Epictetus explains that this distinction only applies to us when we are considered separately, in total isolation. He gives a brilliant analogy. He says, "I agree that if you look at my foot all by itself, it is in accordance with its nature for the foot to be clean. But if it is considered as a foot, a working part of a larger body, and not separately, then it is right and proper for it to tramp through the mud and to step on sharp needles. There may even be a time when that foot will have to be amputated entirely for the sake of the body as a whole. It would not be a real foot otherwise." We have to assume that a similar distinction applies to us personally. Ask yourself, what are you? You are a human being. If you think of yourself simply as a unit apart in total isolation, then yes, it is in accordance with your nature to live to a ripe old age, to be rich, and to be perfectly healthy. But if your view of yourself involves being part of a much larger whole, then, for the sake of that whole, circumstances may make it right for you to be sick. It may be right for you to go on a dangerous journey, to endure crushing poverty, or even to die long before your time. When these things happen, do not complain. Just as a foot severed from a body is no longer truly a foot, do you not realize that in total isolation you would not truly be a human being? Because what is a human being? A human being is essentially a part of a community. Primarily, we are part of the grand community of gods and men, the universe itself. And secondarily, we are part of the city or country we happen to inhabit, which is only a small microcosm of the universe as a whole. So when you ask, is this why I am now being put on trial? The answer is yes. That is exactly why you are on trial. And it is why someone else falls sick. It is why another person undertakes a dangerous voyage. It is why someone else dies and why still another is convicted. In this great body, in this universe, and in this community, it is absolutely inevitable that each and every one of us will face some such event. Our only job is to play the ball well. Epictetus says that your only job, then, is to simply appear before the court, say what you have to say, and make the absolute best of the situation you are in. When it is all over and the judge declares you guilty, you can calmly say, "I wish you well, Judge. I did my part, and now you must decide if you did yours." You can say this because you must never forget that the judge is running a risk, too. He is risking his own moral character with his judgment. Moving into the next section, titled On Indifference, Epictetus expands on the concept of indifferent things. He says that a logical puzzle, like a conjunctive argument, is completely indifferent in and of itself. However, how you actually handle that argument is not indifferent at all. How you handle it proves whether you have true knowledge, mere opinion, or total ignorance. In the exact same way, life itself is an indifferent material. But the use that we make of our life is definitely not indifferent. Therefore, when you hear Stoics say that even life and external things are indifferent, you must not become apathetic or lazy. And by the same token, when you are advised to care deeply about how you use those things, you must not become superficial and suddenly conceive a burning passion for the external things themselves. Epictetus advises that it is always good to be completely clear and honest about the current level of your talent and your training. That way, when unfamiliar topics arise in conversation, you will know enough to just keep still and listen, and you will not be put out or jealous if there are other students who are more advanced than you in that area. Eventually, you will be able to show your own superiority in areas like logic, and if other people become disconcerted or jealous over your skill, you can gently mollify them by simply saying that you had a very good teacher. The exact same rule applies to subjects that require some sort of practical training. Do not ever pretend that you have a particular skill if you do not have it yet. Instead, graciously yield to whoever actually has the requisite experience. For your own part, you should take deep satisfaction in the awareness that your own persistence is actively helping you become an expert in the subject over time. Epictetus then gives a practical example of how to handle social situations with this kind of detachment. Imagine someone tells you to go pay your respects to this powerful man. You say, "Okay, I will call on him, but I will not get on my knees and grovel." Then the person says, "But you were not let into his house." You reply, "Well, you see, I do not know how to break through windows. When I find that the door is shut to me, I either have to climb through the window like a criminal, or I simply have to leave." The person then tells you, "Fine, so when you do get in, talk to him." You say, "Okay, I will talk to him." The person asks, "How will you talk to him?" And you reply, "I will talk to him as an equal." But what if you do not get what you wanted from the powerful man? Epictetus says, of course you did not get it, because whether he gives it to you or not was entirely up to him, not you. So do not take any responsibility for his refusal. Always remember what is yours to control and what belongs to other people, and you will never have any trouble in life. Appropriately, Epictetus quotes the great Stoic philosopher Chrysippus, who perfectly summarized this mindset. Chrysippus said, "As long as the future is uncertain to me, I will always hold to those things which are better adapted to obtaining a life in accordance with nature, because God himself has made me disposed to select them." But Chrysippus continued, "If I somehow knew for a fact that my destiny at this very present moment was to fall ill, I would actually wish for it. Just as my foot, if it had its own intelligence and knew it was part of a body, would eagerly volunteer to get muddy for the sake of the whole." To drive this point home, Epictetus asks us to look at a field of wheat. Is the wheat not grown for the express purpose of turning brown? And does it not turn brown in preparation for being harvested? It is certainly not grown just for its own sake. If the wheat could talk, do you suppose it would beg the farmer to never be harvested? Come on, Epictetus says. To never be harvested is actually a terrible curse that we put on people's crops. You must know that for human beings, too, it is no less of a curse not to die. Wishing to never die is exactly the same as saying, please, God, do not let their wheat ripen, and do not let it ever be brought in for the harvest. But because we humans are the only animals who not only die, but are actually conscious of our death even while it is happening, we are constantly beset by anxiety. Epictetus says that the only reason we have this deep anxiety about death is because we simply do not know who we are. We have not bothered to study what it actually means to be a human being. We should study our own nature in the exact same way that horse trainers, for instance, dedicate their time to learning the ways and the nature of horses. To show what obedience to a higher order looks like, Epictetus points to the historical example of a highly disciplined soldier named Chrysantas. Once, in the heat of battle, Chrysantas had his weapon raised and was poised to stab an enemy combatant. But right at that very second, he heard the trumpet sound the signal to retreat, and he instantly froze. He dropped his weapon and fell back. That is how much he set his commanding captain's will above his own personal welfare or his own desires. Yet Epictetus laments when fate or the universe calls upon us to retreat from life. Not a single one of us is prepared to obey. We suffer what we suffer, but we never do it willingly. Instead, we do it with sobs of protest. And we constantly complain, blaming it all on our so-called circumstances. Epictetus challenges this excuse. He asks, what exactly are circumstances? If by that word you just mean your current situation, well, then literally everything in life is circumstances. But if you are using the word circumstances to mean problems, then where exactly is the problem in the fact that a creature that was born must eventually die? Death is inevitable, and it can come in many forms. It could come by way of a knife, by torture, by drowning in the sea, by a falling piece of masonry, or by the order of a cruel despot. Why do you even care how it comes? As the old proverb says, all roads to the underworld are of equal length. In fact, Epictetus says, if we want to tell the truth about it, being put to death by a despot is actually a much less protracted and painful way to go. No despot ever took 6 full months to cut a person's throat, whereas a fatal illness can easily drag on and cause you to suffer for an entire year. Therefore, all this crying about circumstances and troubles is really just a lot of noise, and a loud clamor of completely meaningless names. A student might complain and say that they risk being executed by the emperor if they go to Rome. Epictetus replies that he faces no less of a mortal danger staying right here in the city of Nicopolis, where deadly earthquakes are a common occurrence. As for you, he asks, are you not risking your life every single time you board a ship to cross the Adriatic Sea? The student argues again, saying that even a person's own opinions can get them into terrible trouble here in Rome. Epictetus asks for clarification. Does the student mean their own opinions? Because no one can ever force you to hold an opinion against your will. Or are they referring to the opinions of other people? If so, how can someone else's wrong opinions pose any real danger to your true inner character? The student tries one more time, saying that they also face the terrible danger of being sent into exile. Epictetus asks calmly, what is exile? Is it really just being forced to live somewhere other than Rome? The student says, exactly. My God, what if I am sent to the desolate prison island of Gyara? Epictetus gives a stark Stoic answer. He says, well, if living on Gyara is tolerable for you, then you will go and you will endure it. But if it is truly intolerable, you always have the ultimate choice of another destination: death. And remember, the grave is the exact same place that the powerful emperor who sent you to Gyara is headed, whether he likes it or not. So with all of this in mind, why make such a huge deal out of going to trial? It is simply not worth all of that exhausting, terrifying preparation. A young man with any real philosophical talent might look back on his anxiety and say, I wasted my time listening to so many lectures, writing so many compositions, and sitting for so long next to an old man who did not amount to much himself, when the truth was so simple. There is really only one thing you need to remember. You only need to remember the core rule that distinguishes what is yours from what is not yours. Do not ever lay claim to anything that belongs to others or to fate. Court and prison are just two different places on a map. One is considered high and prestigious, and the other is considered low and degrading. Your inner character, however, can be kept exactly the same in either place, if you decide that it should. Epictetus says that we will truly rival the greatness of Socrates only when we can spend our time locked in a miserable prison cell composing beautiful hymns to the gods. But considering how weak our attitude has been up to now, Epictetus jokes that he wonders if, while sitting in prison, we could even stand to have someone else offer to read us their own compositions, let alone write our own. Instead of being a Stoic in prison, the man complains. He says, do not bother me with this. Do you not realize the terrible problems I have got? Do you really think I can just sit here and listen to poetry in my current position? Epictetus asks him, why? What is it? What is your position? The man cries out, I am sentenced to death. And Epictetus simply responds, and the rest of us are not. We are all mortal, and we are all sentenced to death from the moment we are born. Moving into the next section, titled What is the Substance of the Good? Epictetus explores the nature of divinity and goodness. He begins with a simple premise. God is helpful, and whatever is good is also helpful. Therefore, it is entirely reasonable to suppose that the divine nature and the nature of the good will correspond perfectly. So we have to ask, what exactly is the divine nature? Is it made of physical flesh? Epictetus says, be serious. Do we associate the divine nature with acquiring real estate or with seeking social status? Hardly. The divine nature is defined by the mind. It is intelligence, and it is correct, rational reason. Because of this, you should look no further than your own mind and intelligence to find the true substance of the good. Of course, you will not find this substance in plants and animals. In a human being, however, the good consists in the exact qualities that distinguish him from those other animals. Since plants do not even have the basic power of perception, the concepts of good and evil are not applicable to them at all. Evidently, for something to be good or bad, it must at least presume the power of using impressions and perceiving the world. But is simply using impressions enough? If it is, then you must speak of goodness and badness in connection with animals just as much as humans. You would have to describe animals as being morally happy or unhappy. But there is a very good reason that you do not do that. Because no matter how well an animal may use its sensory impressions, animals completely lack the rational ability to reflect on them. And Epictetus argues that they should not have that ability, since they were born to serve, not to command. Look at the donkey, for example. Is the donkey in a position of command? No, it was created because man needed an animal with a strong back that was able to carry big loads, and the creature had to be able to walk in order to do that. That is exactly why the donkey was endowed with the power of using impressions. Otherwise, it could not see where to walk. But that is about the total extent of its natural endowments. After all, if the donkey had also magically acquired the rational ability to reflect on its use of those impressions, it would quite rightly refuse to obey us and serve our physical needs. If it had reason, it would, in fact, be mankind's equal and peer. So if this rational reflection is absent from plants and from animals, it is only logical that you should look for the nature of the good exclusively in human beings, where you ordinarily apply the word. It is true that animals are God's creatures too, but they are not creatures that were placed in a position of authority, and they are not literal parts of God. You, on the other hand, are a rational creature placed in charge of your own life, and more than that, you are an actual particle of God Himself. There is a literal bit of the divine within you. Epictetus asks, why do you not know of this profound relation? Why do you forget your divine origins? When you eat your meals, you should bear in mind who it is exactly that you are feeding. When you have sex, you should reflect on who you are during the act. In your daily conversation, in your physical exercise, in your philosophical discourse, do you remember that it is a piece of God you are feeding and a piece of God you are exercising? You carry the divine around with you every single day, and you do not even know it, you poor fool. Do not imagine that I am talking about some external physical deity made out of silver or gold. You carry the living God inside of your own mind, and you are completely blind to the fact that you actively desecrate Him with your dirty words and your dirty thoughts. Think about it. You would not dare repeat those dirty words or indulge those dirty thoughts if there were even a mere physical statue of a God standing nearby. And yet, you do it constantly, while carrying the living divine within you. Epictetus continues his powerful rebuke. He says that God Himself is right there within you, intimately seeing and overhearing every single thing that you do and say. And yet, do you even care? You act like a pariah, completely exiled from goodness, because you have absolutely no sense of your own divine heritage. He asks us to consider what happens when we graduate a young man from school and send him out into the real world. What are we all so anxious about? We worry that he will make terrible mistakes. We worry that he will eat poorly, have reckless sexual affairs, humiliate himself, and end up going around in rags. Or conversely, that he will superficially affect the latest ridiculous fashions. But why does he fall into these traps? He falls into them because he is completely ignorant of his own personal God. He does not realize who actually goes with him when he leaves the safety of his school and his former friends. When the young man feels lonely and writes to us to say, "I wish you were here with me," we tend to indulge him and pity him. But Epictetus says, you have God right there with you. Who else do you possibly need? Even if you invited the wisest philosopher to come and visit you, would they tell you anything different than what your own inner divine reason is already telling you? To illustrate how we should act, Epictetus uses the analogy of a famous sculpture. He says, suppose you were one of the magnificent statues carved by the great artist Phidias. Suppose you were his famous statue of Zeus, or his beautiful statue of Athena. If you were that statue, you would certainly have a deep sense of who you were, and a great reverence for the master artist who brought you into being. And if you had a brain, you would make every effort to avoid doing anything that would bring shame on either your creator or yourself. You would never want to be caught in an embarrassing position, by the thousands of spectators who come to look at you. But think about this. It was not Phidias who created you. It was Zeus, or the divine universe itself, that created you. Should that fact not make you even more careful about the impression you make on the world? What is a human sculptor like Phidias compared to the divine creator? How can their creations even be compared? Think about it. What other work of art comes already equipped with the very same powers that the artist displayed in making it? Do dead marble statues possess the power of creation? No. Neither do statues made of bronze or gold or ivory. The great Athena statue carved by Phidias has its arm raised to support the statue of victory, and it has maintained that one exact pose for the entire duration of its long existence. The works of God, on the other hand, are living, breathing creatures, fully equipped with the divine power of perception and rational judgment. God made you, and yet you mock him with your behavior. Why? He not only made you, but out of all his creations, you alone were given the ultimate power of self-determination. And you not only ignore that incredible gift, but you actively bring shame on the profound faith that God placed in you. Epictetus points out that you would never have been so negligent in caring for a human orphan if God had put one in your way. Well, God has entrusted you to yourself. It is as if he said to you, I had no one more dependable than you. Just see to it that this human being keeps the natural qualities he was born with: integrity, honor, dignity, patience, calmness, and poise. But sadly, you cannot even do that much. You cannot even care for the orphan of your own soul. Now, Epictetus admits that there will be people who hear him speak like this and ask, why is this person so serious and self-important? Epictetus replies with humility. He says that if his serious demeanor seems like pretension, it is only because he does not yet have complete, unwavering confidence in the philosophical principles that he has learned and espouses. He admits that he still fears for his own human frailty. But he says, if you grant me that ultimate confidence, then I will finally show you the right look and the right bearing. Then you will see the finished statue of a Stoic, all bright and gleaming. And when you see it, do not expect a study in smugness or arrogance. You will simply see a human being living up to their true, divine potential. Epictetus says that after all, the famous statue of Zeus at Olympia does not project an air of arrogance or smug superiority. Instead, the statue looks at us right in the eye, which is exactly the way one ought to look when they are on the point of saying, "My word is true and irrevocable." Epictetus says that if you grant him complete confidence in his philosophy, that is exactly the sort of person you will find him to be. He will be trustworthy, honorable, noble, and completely poised. Now, he will not, to be sure, be magically immune to death, old age, or disease the way that God is immune, but he will still be fully prepared to die and to face any terrifying illness with a truly godlike dignity. Epictetus says, that much is mine to do, even if I cannot accomplish the rest. In short, he says, I will show you that I have the true strength of a philosopher. And what kind of strength would that be? It is not physical strength. It is a will that never fails to get exactly what it wants. It is a faculty of aversion that always successfully avoids what it dislikes. It is the strength of having proper impulse, careful purpose, and disciplined assent to the impressions of the world. That is the ultimate human specimen that you should prepare yourselves to see. Moving into the next section, titled On Social Roles as a Guide to Conduct, Epictetus pivots to how we should act in our daily lives based on who we are. He asks a fundamental question: who are you? In the first place, you are a human being, which is to say, You are a being possessed of no greater faculty than your own free choice. All of your other faculties are entirely subordinate to it, and your choice itself is completely unconfined and independent. Next, you must consider the profound gift of reason. Reason is what sets you apart from wild animals. It is what sets you apart from mindless sheep. By virtue of these two faculties, free choice and reason, you are a member of the universe with full citizen rights. You were born not to serve blindly, but to govern yourself, because you actually have the ability to understand the divine order and its overarching pattern. Now, what does the title of citizen actually mean in this cosmic sense? In this role, a true citizen never acts strictly in his own self-interest, and he never thinks of himself alone. Instead, he acts like a physical hand or a foot that suddenly gained sense and realized its place in the natural order of the body. Once the hand realizes it is part of a body, all of its actions and desires aim at nothing except contributing to the common good of the whole. Because of this, philosophers rightly say that if a good person actually knew for a fact that sickness, death, or severe disability lay in his immediate future, he would not run away. He would actually invite those hardships in, because he realizes that this is a necessary part of the universal plan. He knows that the universe has precedence over any single constituent part, and the city has precedence over any one citizen. But of course, since we do not actually know the future, we are completely justified in sticking to the things that are preferable by nature, like health and safety. Because seeking those things is, after all, our natural instinct from birth. Next, Epictetus says, you must remember that you are somebody's son. What does this specific social role mean for your conduct? It means regarding everything of yours as belonging to your father as well. It means always letting him have his way and never trying to hurt him with your words or your actions. It means never griping or complaining about him behind his back. Instead, you must defer to him at every possible opportunity, and in that same spirit, cooperate with him as best you can. Next, you must know that you are a brother. This social role also strictly calls for deference, respect, and civility. You must never get into petty family fights over external material things. Instead, you should give those material things up willingly, and if you do, your true moral standing will increase in direct proportion to your sacrifice. Epictetus gives a practical example. He says you should freely make a gift of your expensive box seat in the theater, or happily give up a bit of food, if that is what the family fight is about. If you do this, just look at the deep gratitude you will get in return, and you will see how much greater that gratitude is than the tiny material sacrifice you made. Epictetus says that, finally, you must reflect carefully on all the other social roles you play in your life. If you happen to be a city council member, you must consider exactly what a council member should do. If you are a young person, you must ask what being young actually means. If you are old, you must consider what age implies for your behavior. If you are a father, you must ask what true fatherhood actually entails. Every single one of our titles, when we honestly reflect upon them, naturally suggests the actions that are appropriate to that specific role. Because of this, Epictetus says that if you go off and yell at your brother in anger, his immediate reaction is to tell you that you have forgotten who you are, and you have forgotten what you stand for. Think about it. If you were a professional metal worker who suddenly fumbled with his tools and forgot how to use them, you would clearly have lost touch with the metal worker you once were. In the exact same way, if you forget what it means to be a brother, and instead become your brother's bitter enemy, do not trick yourself into thinking that you have made a trivial exchange. Epictetus asks, if you are transformed from a decent, social human being into some mean, snarling, dangerous beast, is there really no loss involved? Or is it that you have to lose physical money before you actually feel penalized? Is losing money really the only kind of loss that counts with us? He points out a total contradiction in our priorities. If you were to suddenly lose your capacity to read a book or your capacity to play music, you would think it was an absolute disaster. But at the same time, you think absolutely nothing of losing your capacity to be honest, decent, and civilized. What makes this even worse is that those other misfortunes, like losing your sight or your hearing, come from some outside cause that you cannot control. But losing your honesty and decency is entirely your own fault. Moreover, Epictetus argues that it is neither strictly honorable to have abilities like reading and playing music, nor is it dishonorable to lose them. But it is deeply dishonorable to lose your moral capacities. That is a terrible misfortune for which we have no one to blame but ourselves. To illustrate how moral failure is its own punishment, Epictetus gives several examples. He says a young man who sells his body for favors is deprived of his manhood. The man who seduces him is no longer the honorable man he once was either, and his character is compromised in 100 other ways besides. In the same way, an adulterer does away with a just, decent, and honorable human being, destroying the good neighbor and the good citizen that he might have been. A hot-headed, angry person incurs one kind of internal loss, and a coward incurs another kind. But the fundamental rule is this: no one is ever bad without suffering a loss or a penalty of some kind. Now, if you only look for their penalty in terms of money and wealth, you might find all of these bad people completely safe and scot-free. They might even be helped and rewarded for their terrible offenses if they happen to gain by it financially. But Epictetus says, if money is your only standard for harm, then consider that, by your own logic, someone who physically loses their nose does not actually suffer any harm, because they did not lose any money. You would immediately object and say, of course they suffer harm. They are maimed physically. Epictetus pushes deeper. He asks, but what if they are not maimed physically, but are just deprived of the invisible sense of smell? In other words, is there not an associated mental and spiritual faculty that is good to have, and a terrible misfortune to lose? If you ask what he means by a spiritual or mental faculty, Epictetus explains. He asks, are we not born with a natural sense of fairness? We are. So, if you destroy your own sense of fairness by acting unjustly, is there really no harm done? Is nothing sacrificed? Do we not lose something incredibly dear to us? Do we not all have an innate sense of honor? Do we not have a natural sense of benevolence, a sense of kindness, and a sense of compassion? Well, if someone willingly parts with these beautiful human sensibilities in order to do evil, do you really suppose that they go unpunished and unhurt? Their punishment is the loss of their own humanity. Hearing all this, someone might naturally ask, well, does that mean that if someone wrongs me, I should not hurt them in return? Epictetus replies by asking the student to first of all look closely at what wrongdoing actually is, and to remember what they have heard about it from the philosophers. If it is true that good and bad really only relate to our own internal choices, then consider what retaliation actually means. Epictetus points out that wanting to hurt someone back amounts to saying something completely absurd like, well, since that guy just hurt himself by committing the injustice he did to me, should I not go and wrong him in order to hurt myself in retaliation? Why do we not actually picture retaliation to ourselves in this logical way? It is because we have been conditioned to see an injury only when a physical or financial loss is incurred. Whereas, if the loss stems from our own moral choices, we do not suspect that any real harm has been done to us at all. After all, Epictetus says, we do not get a physical headache after making a moral error in judgment or committing an act of injustice. Doing evil does not give us eye trouble or a stomach ache, and it does not cause us to lose our property. And for most of us, those physical and financial things are the only things that actually matter. As to whether our inner character will remain loyal and honest, or whether it will become false and depraved, we do not care about that in the least. We only care about it insofar as the topic of morality comes up for a theoretical examination in a philosophy school. And the tragic result of treating morality purely as an academic exercise is that our debating skills improve, but they improve at the direct cost of our actual character. Moving into the next section, titled On Starting Philosophy, Epictetus discusses how a person should properly begin their philosophical journey. He says that people who come to philosophy the right way, walking through the front door, as it were, always begin by honestly acknowledging their own faults and their own limitations in the areas of their life that have the most urgency. He uses the analogy of formal education. When we come into the world, we have absolutely no innate knowledge pertaining to complex subjects like the geometry of an isosceles triangle or the musical theory of a half-tone or quarter-tone scale. We have to learn about these subjects much later in life through highly specialized training. And as a result, absolutely no one who is untrained in these subjects pretends to know anything about them. However, the situation is completely otherwise when it comes to our ideas about good and bad, right and wrong, appropriate and inappropriate, happiness, duty and obligation. We are actually born with a basic, innate understanding of what these moral words mean. Because of this, everyone uses these words, which is to say, everyone constantly tries to apply these innate preconceptions to specific things in their daily lives. You hear phrases like this all the time. Her action was good, or it was her duty, or it was not her duty. Or people will say, she was fortunate, she was not fortunate, she is honest, or she is dishonest. Everyone says these things because no one is in any doubt about how to use the words themselves. When it comes to basic morality, no one feels that they have to wait to be told what the words mean, the way we once had to wait to learn our letters or be taught how to pronounce foreign words. The reason for this confidence, Epictetus explains, is that we actually come into the world already knowing some basic things that nature, you might say, has taught us from birth. And building on this innate foundational knowledge, we go out into the world and come to form our various opinions. So a stubborn student might interrupt and say, well, whatever you may say, I already know good from bad, and I already have an idea of what the good is. Epictetus smiles and replies, I allow that you do have an idea, but having the idea is only the beginning.